Hi guys, Tom here. Today's upgrade is going from the 14-tooth stock front sprocket to a 17-tooth front sprocket. What that's going to do is allow more chain to be delivered to the rear tire, so the tire will turn faster for the same number of RPM. Also increasing the range from first gear to second gear, so I don't feel like I have to shift as fast from first to second. Should increase the top end and of course make the bike more rideable. There are two bolts holding this front sprocket cover on, so we're going to use an 8mm wrench to remove both of them. So with the sprocket cover removed, we have access to the front sprocket. You can see this is the 14-tooth sprocket, and I'm going to be taking this sprocket out and putting in the larger 17-tooth. First step is we're going to loosen this chain quite a bit by loosening the rear tire. So for the first step to loosen this back tire, I'm going to loosen the axle. For the Boom Vader, it takes a 14mm wrench and a 17mm wrench. I'm going to secure the axle on the left side and work on the right side to loosen the axle nut. Now with the axle nut loosened, I'm going to loosen the lock nut. I'm going to turn the lock nut all the way out. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Now with the lock nut turned out on both sides, we're going to loosen this adjuster nut. You can see how loose it is. Now the axle will be sliding back and forth with ease. I'm going to move the adjusting nut back on the opposite side. Now this will allow the tire to slide forward. Just going to push on the tire, hold the bike. Axle moves forward, so now the chain is much looser. So with the chain looser, we should be able to get this sprocket off with no problems. We just need to remove these locking bolts, remove this locking collar. Be very careful. You can see the sprocket wants to move, which could cause the motorcycle to roll. So make sure your motorcycle is on a nice secure surface. Now with both bolts removed, this collar will rotate and its little raised areas will match up with the valleys and should come right out. Try not to drop all your parts. So I like to use a magnetic parts tray to try to keep everything from disappearing. The sprocket will come off. The new sprocket will go on. Now, clearance between the sprocket and the housing is a little tight, so it's best to get the chain on first before you try to put everything back on the shaft. You see it's a little tight. So now, the locking collar, line up the holes. So we can put the bolts back in. Little thread locker. Back to my 10mm wrench. As you can see, the sprocket wants to rotate at the same time as I'm turning the bolt. So be very careful again. Make sure the bike does not move. All right. So now the lock ring is on with the locking bolts. Thread locker on there. As you can tell, the sprocket does move since it's riding inside this little groove, this locking ring. So the sprocket kind of free floats, but it is on the shaft and it is not coming off. So now let's tension up this chain. Now it's time to retension the chain. I'm going to line up the chain tensioner. Now the first nut will be used to tension, and then the lock nut is turned all the way out. So I'm just going to finger tight the tensioner right now. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. And the goal is a little bit of weight on the bike. Tighten up that chain. So I'm going to tighten up the tensioner equal on both sides. You can count how many flats that you're turning, and then turn on the opposite side. Or you can just kind of look at the wheel and check to make sure it's aligned with the center of the bike, the top edge and the bottom edge of the bike. Some people use the guides on the side. You can also measure the distance of this bolt, how far it's sticking out, to make a comparison to the opposite side. So you can see if it's equally applied to both sides. Watch that chain. Put a little weight on it. So put a little weight on the bike. That appears fine. Check the distance between this tensioner and the opposite side. Excellent. Once again, check the tension on the chain. And then now we're going to adjust these lock nuts up against the adjusting nut, a little thread locker. You can use another wrench to hold the adjusting nut. They're adjusting the lock nut, and do the same thing on the opposite side. Now, retighten the axle. Once again, it's a 14 millimeter bolt and a 17 millimeter wrench on the opposite side. All right, so tensioners are tightened, locked down, axle bolt is tightened down, the tire is in line with the bike, and the distances are equal. So now with the chain tensioned, the sprocket is on, locked in place, ready to put the front sprocket cover back on. As always, a little thread locker. All right, so the job's done. Just need to clean up. I'm gonna take it out for a ride and then test out this new front sprocket. By the way, I just want to say thank you. If you have any comments, feedback, please leave them below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.